There's still a lot of great work in this area being done, papers coming out all the time in idiopathic generalized epilepsy, which I think is just an area that we need a lot more research in because people have fewer treatment options.
Fellow Homo sapiens. Today we are hearing from the award-winning epileptologist Brad Kamitaki of Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School in the US, who tells us about his study into and the needs of people affected by one of the complex idiopathic generalized epilepsies, plus his thoughts on honesty and clarity with both people with an epilepsy and any caregivers.
Hi everyone, my name's Brad Kamitaki. I'm an epileptologist at Rutgers Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. Basically, I enjoy doing research on epilepsy disparities, teaching medical students, residents, and of course, taking care of people with epilepsy. Happy to be here.
Fabulous. So what led you down the long, winding, what seems like almost never-ending road of the epilepsies?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I'm someone that generally likes a lot of different things. So when I started neurology residency, for example, a lot of different things drew me in, like stroke at the beginning. But then I had a mentor at Columbia where I did residency. Her name's Hyunmi Choi. She's a epileptologist, researcher. And I just saw that the things that she was able to do with her patients, really take care of them with whatever options they had available, including medications, epilepsy surgery, and also I saw the long-lasting relationships they can form with patients as you follow them over time. So that's what really drew me in to start with, and then fortunately I ended up liking it a lot, just like the epilepsy community in general, patients, family members. So it's something I have a great deal of passion for, I would say.
And I guess he's talking about like long-term relationships with patients. I assume that you're an adult epileptologist.
Yes. I see mostly adult patients, yeah.
And I also like that you mention family members because they can play such a key part in the lives and sometimes care of people with the epilepsy.
Yeah, definitely. For patients where they can't advocate for themselves, definitely it's helpful to have, really critical, I think, to have family support or caregiver support. I was talking to you earlier about the survey project that I'm doing where we ask patients, not only patients, but also family members, caregivers, relatives, loved ones, about ways that we can improve epilepsy care, specifically in New Jersey. But I think getting that perspective is really important as well.
Because I think often, depending obviously upon the situation, the person with the epilepsy and family members, sometimes the carers can answer questions that sometimes we can't.
Yeah, and often, if the person with epilepsy might not realize they're having a seizure, it impacts loved ones a lot more. Just seeing the person go through seizures and like the struggles with that could be very, obviously, it's a shared responsibility.
Yeah, and you say seizures, but also I think mental health, any sort of movement disorders that might come with it, things like that too.
Yes, everything, yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that I got in touch with you relatively recently was regarding your paper, which got International League Against Epilepsy Award because it was that fabulous. So everyone knows the title is a bit of a thesis itself, but it's clinical and EEG factors associated with anti-seizure medication resistance in idiopathic generalized epilepsy. Could you tell us a bit about your paper, please? What led you to it, Brad?
I mentioned Hyunmi Choi, my mentor. So this is a project that she really conceived and had the idea for when I was in fellowship. And so I worked on it beginning from then and then into my time at Rutgers. But basically there's been a lot of really great work already done on factors that we see associated with people with IGE or idiopathic generalized epilepsy that tend to develop drug resistance, meaning they keep having seizures despite multiple medications. And so a lot of really good work like I said, has already been done in that. And one thing that Hyunmi and other investigators at Columbia, Yale had also found was another factor associated with drug resistance was what we call catamenial seizures, or for people that have menstrual cycles, seizures that worsen in relation to their menstrual cycle. And what we tried to do with this paper was to just bring a large group of patients, not only from one center, but from multiple different centers. And actually we got patients also data from Australia as well. So from two different countries, the US and Australia. and looking at multiple different factors, both clinical and EEG, that might be associated with drug resistance. So we're able to look at, pretty large number of patients, diverse patients from different countries, to just answer that question a little bit better.
What was the process like, and how, and what were the outcomes really? What did you discover?
Yeah, so this was a case control study. So we just identified a large number of cases, people that had drug resistant IgE, and then controls that were responsive to medications. And so yeah, it took a little bit of work, kind of getting the data. But basically, each investigator at their institution, so Cornell University, Columbia University, Rutgers, where I'm at in the U.S., and then Monash University, Royal Melbourne Hospital in Australia. We all identified those each cases and controls, went through their EEGs, looked at them again to count the number of spikes or discharges, look at other abnormalities on the EEG, and then we looked through the chart, got all that data, and then once each center got their data, we combined them all together and did statistics to look at those factors that were associated with drug resistance. So that was the process. It did take a little while, but so after we did the analysis, then we looked at the both clinical and EEG factors, and what we found were, it was in line with what I mentioned other people had looked at this before, but the catamenial seizures, we confirmed that did seem to be associated with people with drug resistance, as well as if people have multiple seizure types. So in idiopathic generalized epilepsy, there can be people can have absence seizures, myoclonic seizures, or jerking, and then generalized tonic-clonic seizures. So people that had all three of those seizure types, as well as people that had both absence seizures and generalized tonic-clonic. Absence, as you probably know, are the ones where people might stare blankly, for a time. So people with those seizure types also seem to have drug resistance. And then from the EEG side, the more discharges that they had, specifically in sleep. So when they're sleeping, if they had a lot of discharges, or if they had an EEG finding that's kind of been newly described called generalized polyspike train, or GPT. When we saw that on the EEG, that was also seen with drug resistance. So I think the way that our paper added on to what previous people had already done was that we looked at multiple different factors, not just one, but to see the independent contribution of all of those factors. So each of those were independently associated with, drug resistant or medically refractory seizures. And then also to look at not just one center, but multiple different centers from two different countries, I think was another strength of our paper and our analysis. So that's kind of what we contributed, I guess I would say.
Wonderful. And so I'm not sure it was necessarily expected that you would win the award. What was the feedback you got on this paper?
Yeah, when it came out, just like getting a paper published, first of all, is an honor. And it was my first paper in Epilepsia, which, is the premier epilepsy journal. So just from the beginning, I was already really happy about that. When it came out, I don't know. A lot of my friends, other centers, that I trained with or worked with before, even just texted me to say that they're, for example, doing our paper and journal club, which, that was just great. That's the first thing anyone that does a paper wants to hear, that people are actually reading it,
Well, yeah. There was purpose in it, Yeah.
And we're not just like throwing it out into the void, So that was definitely some of the early feedback that I got. Definitely the prize itself was unexpected. The prizes for young investigators. So I guess like that's something that I'm still a bit young. So, so that was, I think that helped. And then, and then just to have the opportunity to present more of my work. I've been able to present at AAN, AES conference on what we did. And then now for the ILAE Congress, this fall. So I'm really excited just to talk to people, get, more people knowing about what we did. and hopefully encourage, there's still a lot of great work in this area being done, papers coming out all the time in idiopathic generalized epilepsy, which I think is just an area that we need a lot more research in because people have fewer treatment options, compared to focal epilepsy. Really much, fewer medications. We can't use all the same medications for them. They don't have good surgical options right now, though people are studying neuromodulation, deep brain stimulation right now, but it's not currently the standard of care for people with IGE. So, getting us more treatment options would be great as well.
And I suppose all this work, your paper but the work that you're doing, one hopes that it can help educate other clinicians, other neurologists and epilepsy nurses to know what to communicate to patients and help them to maybe plan their lives a bit, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think with non-epileptologists, neurologists, primary care doctors, this has been talked about, I'm sure, a lot, but we often notice that sometimes people might accept a certain number of seizures, where for us, our goal is always seizure freedom to prevent SUDEP, any complications, to allow people to drive if they can,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think just like hopefully getting it out there that drug resistance is a problem and one that we need to work on, even among non-epileptologists, for them to know that, hey, refer this person to an epilepsy center because they're still having seizures. There's things that maybe we can do for them. Is one big, important thing that I hope will continue to get out there. And then secondly, helping clinicians understand what tests might be helpful to figure out if people are going to develop drug resistance. For example, I mentioned that more discharges in sleep was a useful marker. So doing an ambulatory EEG or a long-term EEG rather than just a routine, a short EEG that we might often do for people with IGE rather than a longer study might give us more important prognostic information.
Mm-hmm.
So, considering longer EEG tests, asking people in detail about their seizure types, asking people that menstruate, do they get worse around your menstrual cycle? Just like trying to refine the questions and the information that we get from people so that we can give them more useful, better information and more useful information out. I think that's what I was hoping to accomplish with the study.
Well, if anybody would like access to this paper, it's out there. The link is on the website. And yeah, just the more educated we become, I think, on each individual person with an epilepsy, the more, hopefully, the better decisions can be made. And honesty with the person with the epilepsy and the family can help them make more long-term, plans, decisions. Exactly. And, I just personally think it can be good not to hide what might be scary things from the person or family.
Yeah, exactly. You know how it is right now. If I see a person and I diagnose them with, for example, juvenile myoclonic epilepsy, a young person often, in the clinic, often it's, okay, we're starting you on this medication. We don't exactly know how you'll do. There's a good chance you might do well. 85% of people do really well with this type of epilepsy, but 15% don't. I wish we could, I can't tell you exactly right now how you'll do, but so that's, a common scenario in the clinic that we have. You might do well, you'll probably do well, but we don't really know. So I think, our paper hopefully, and future work, other, researchers will hopefully bridge that gap so that maybe if we do longer EEG, get them more information, ask them these questions, can we build even a model, so that we can predict the risk that they'll develop drug resistance? I mean, I think, I could see that could be disconcerting to know, I have a high chance of that, but at least right? Which is better than not knowing, I think. People do, I think, want to know more as best as we can give them that information. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to give people those numbers early on so that we know we need to watch you more closely. We need to, maybe think about different medication changes. If something's not working for you, maybe I need to see you sooner than 6 months or a year. Maybe I need to see you in a couple months, kind of thing. those things I think are really critical and could help with epilepsy care right now, especially for people with IGE.
Thank you very much to Brad for sharing with us his paper, his results, and his passion for improving the lives of people affected by the epilepsies, especially in this case the IGEs. If you'd like to learn more about the idiopathic generalised epilepsies, and indeed Brad's paper, do check out the links on the website torierobinson.com or go via epilepsysparks.com and click on the podcast tab.